everyone and welcome to Monthly Reads. This is the video series where I look at the books that I have read over the past month. So things are a little bit different now. I recently invested in a Kindle, which I'm really happy with. Normally I do prefer like hardback books and paperbacks, but I was running out of space and the local library around here is not very good, so I thought I want to keep reading, and so I thought I would invest in a Kindle. Now most of the books I'm going to read on this Kindle are going to be like standalone novels or new series that I'm not 100% sure about, so I don't want to invest in buying a load of like physical books or like classic novels and things like that. So that gets me onto the books that I first read this month. So I went to an exhibition at the British Library back in February about fantasy and the genre and how it started, and one of the books that they mentioned was the Mysteries of Udolpho, which is a very early sort of gothic novel, and I thought, you know what, I should read that because I really enjoy gothic novels, and I've read a couple. So like I've read Dracula, Frankenstein, and this is a much earlier one. It was written in I think 1794. I knew from that fact it would be very different to all the others that I'd read, as obviously the development of the novel and what we see as literature today is very different to what it was back then. But I have read a few Jane Austen novels. I have read Northanger Abbey, where they also mention the Mysteries of Udolpho, so I thought, why not, let's read that one now finally. So the Mysteries of Udolpho, it's a novel about a girl called Emily whose parents die and she ends up going to live with her aunt, but then her aunt gets married and she goes to this castle in Italy which is called Udolpho, and there strange things happen and she ends up eventually escaping the castle and fleeing back to France where she comes from and moving back into her family home. But there's a lot of like trials and tribulations before she eventually gets there. Well, the first thing about this novel is that there is a lot of description of places. Most of it is like just a tour of the scenery everywhere. It takes a long time to get started, unfortunately, as well, which would probably put a lot of modern readers off. I found that unlike most normal books where they would go straight in and be like, her parents died and she was an orphan and she was moving to live with her aunt. Nope, they don't start with that. They start with this whole big description of her father and his life and what he's like, to then suddenly then explain that her mother died, and to then go on this whole journey where her and her father go on holiday for a little bit to sort of get over the grief, which that it makes complete sense. But there's so much of the book is taken up with this journey that her and her father go on that it really does seem like, when is the plot starting? When is this place Udolpho actually gonna turn up in the novel? And so that made it very difficult to sort of like engage with as a modern reader. I kept at it though. That's the one thing with this book. It's a very long book. It's about 700 pages long, and a lot of that is fluff that kind of needed to be there in the 18th century but doesn't need to be there now. From a historical point of view, obviously back then they didn't want that. It needed to be a sensational novel because that's what it was, but a sensational novel back then is not the same as what we would consider a sensational novel now. A lot of the shocks need to be dispersed quite evenly between lots of other things happening, and that makes a lot of sense. But nowadays we're so used to sort of like all the shocking stuff happening like sort of bam 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 one after the other, whereas with this it's sort of something shocking happens and then it's mundane for like 3 chapters, and then something shocking happens again and then it's mundane for three or 4 chapters again. And that's just, I think, the pacing of a novel at that time. Like I said, I've read a couple of novels from this time. I can sort of understand and see why Jane Austen survives, but unfortunately Anne Radcliffe's work hasn't quite survived in the same way. It's easier to have shocking encounters of random strangers turning up at your house that are related to you than sort of like finding dead bodies in cupboards and then learning that they're not dead bodies. Overall I did like the book and I did enjoy it, and you do get the payoff for the mystery. Like, it doesn't leave things untied up at the end. You do find out what happens, and all of the mysteries do have non-supernatural answers to them. That is the only thing. If you were hoping to read this and hoping for the mysteries to have a supernatural conclusion, they don't. They all have really mundane, well, not really mundane, but they all have perfectly human answers to them. It's very much like Scooby-Doo if Scooby-Doo goes on sightseeing as well at the same time, and would rather tell you about the forests and streams and the mountains as opposed to tell you about who the masked monster is in the haunted house. That's kind of the best way to describe it. And there is a dog in it as well, and the dog is the most random thing in this book. The author clearly forgot about the dog, because she mentions the dog at her family home, and then she doesn't mention the dog again until she's in Italy, and she's like, there's a secret door in her bedroom in Italy, and she knows about it, and she's like, put furniture in front of it, but somebody keeps opening it. And then one night she says, oh, the dog's gonna stay in the room with me, and I'm like, hang on a second, and she specifically mentions that it's her father's dog, so it clearly came from France with her. I'm like, okay. And then the dog barks when somebody comes in the room, and then that's it. You don't hear about the dog again. And then a bit later on, again, when she's trying to escape the castle, the dog tries to follow her, and that's again the dog mentioned. And I'm just very much like, the author clearly forgot that there was a dog, and a lot of the things in this book wouldn't make sense if the dog had just been there all the time, unfortunately, which is kind of a bit of a disappointment and a letdown. And I think, yeah, remember, small things matter in your novel. If you're going to write a dog in, have the continuity. She either left the dog in France, or she had the dog with her all the time in Italy. It's a bit weird that it's like half and half. Would I recommend this novel to people? Probably. It depends. If you wanted to read this book because you were interested in like Gothic literature and how it began, then yeah, I definitely would recommend it. It's a long slog. You really got to be prepared for how long this novel is and how mundane it is, because there's this whole romantic love story that happens in it as well that I haven't mentioned because it was a distraction from the plot. But it's probably what made the book readable to the 18th century. Advertising it as like these two lovers reuniting and, you know, finally getting together in sort of like a proper, you know, reasonable 18th century way, but with these mysteries happening as the backdrop, probably was the way to advertise it. Nowadays I'd cut all that out and we'll just have the mystery, thanks, you know. Overall, I did actually enjoy the book. It was slow and it was difficult and there was a lot of distractions, but it's not like I've not read plenty of books that are like that before. And you do find out at the end what the mystery is. It's just a real shame that the author has to literally spend an entire chapter explaining everything to you, whereas what would have been nice is if you'd have been able to pick up those clues as you went along. Some of them were good, like some of them she really led you and the main character along this false trail to believe that it was one thing, and then at the end she goes, actually no, it was this, and you were falsely led down there. But then once you knew that piece of information, it felt like the other mystery should have slotted into place and gone, oh, because of that there was this, but it doesn't. She has to then explain everything. Like the portrait, like there's no way anyone would figure out what the portrait was and what was hidden behind the portrait, but so the author has to literally spell it out for you, and it just felt like a shame. Like it would have been nice to have had some little, rather than spend all that time on the scenery, spend a little bit more time on giving us a couple more clues to what some of the mysteries were. But then I feel like that's probably the whole point of the novel, that she wanted it to be like, oh, it's a mystery, we don't know what it is, and then suddenly it's just like, oh yeah, here's all the history behind it, this explains exactly what it was. Which kind of means it's a bit of a letdown at the end. You get this build up to you finding out what's going to happen, and then suddenly you get one little bit of the clue, it slots all into place, and you're like, oh, I figured it out, but hang on a second, there's all these other mysteries that we didn't figure out. And then the author's like, here you go, here's all the answers for it. and then yay, everyone has a happy ending, the two lovers get married, and it's like, oh great, that's nice, yeah, wonderful. So yeah, if you like novels that get distracted a lot and are really just tour books, then yeah, this is for you. If you want to read a really dense gothic novel, then probably not for you. Like, it's very tame by today's standards, but overall it was good. It was what I expected. Just, you know, just kind of, it knew what it was doing, it just kind of didn't quite execute it in the way that I wanted it to. But you can see now why novelists went on to write their own gothic novels that did execute it better, because they just took out all that fluff, because they were like, I don't care if I get called scandalous or people think I'm weird. Whereas this author, I think she liked this kind of thing, she just didn't want to get, you know, called out for it. Now, at the beginning of this video, I mentioned that I got a Kindle because I didn't want books taking up more space. Well, unfortunately, there is a series that I've been reading for a while, and if you've seen some of my early videos, or like if you've been watching any of these monthly read videos, you will have heard me mention Raymond E. Feist and the Rift War cycle. Well, I've got about half of the Rift War books, and there's about 30 of them, so there's quite a lot. And I happened to go into a charity shop the other day, and they had all of the books, well, nearly all of them. I think there's only 2 that I'm missing now, and they were all like £2, £2.50, and it was just like, I can't pass up this opportunity. So now I have this huge bag of books. There are literally so many books in here. There are books down there. Like, I think there are about 15 books in here. Some of them are hardbacks, like this one. Some of them are paperbacks. And yeah, so I have a lot of books now and a lot of reading to do. So I better get on with reading the Rift War cycle, because yeah, I need to be able to get this out of my living room, this huge bag, and you know, have space again.